Something ain't right with this here Sonic X Shadow Generations game. First of all, I played through the entirety of both games and not a single time did Sonic and Shadow kiss each other. So that's a problem right there, false advertising. But more importantly, there is some weird stuff happening with this Sonic game that does not normally happen for other Sonic games. Everybody seems to really be enjoying it. The entire Sonic community, it seems we're all very happy with this game. When was the last time that happened? Mania, probably, but even then there's a lot of people that don't care for classic Sonic, so probably like Sonic Generations is the last time that pretty much the entire fan base was digging a Sonic game. But even beyond us, critics and general audiences all seem to really be enjoying this game as well. And then you look at the sales figures, the fact that it's sold 1 million copies in just a few days. They say it's 1 day, but really with the early release, it's more like 3 or 4 days. But whatever. Still, 1 million copies in just a couple of days for Sonic is incredibly good. If it manages to maintain that momentum, then this game should easily outsell Sonic Frontiers, which I would be very happy with, because this game is a much better game than Sonic Frontiers, if you ask me. And if Sega and Sonic Team are gonna learn lessons from a Sonic game selling well, this is the game that they should be learning lessons from. A simple, straightforward Sonic game. It's not some bloated, quote-unquote, ambitious mess of a Sonic game. It's finished, it's polished, it's well-designed, well put together, has decent-looking visuals, good story that is very authentic to what Sonic is. It's not afraid to let Sonic be Sonic. For once, they actually did everything right, and I'm glad it's paying off, because obviously a Sonic game selling well means more resources will be allocated for future Sonic things, so that's cool. But also, I'm hoping this will show Sonic Team that all you really need to do is just make a great game. Can we please finally be done with all of the messing around that this franchise has been doing since Sonic Adventure, with all of its stupid ideas and dumb things that they kept on shoving into their games for so long to make them worse? We don't need fishing, we don't need treasure hunting, we don't need terrible character action combat, we don't need baby puzzles, we don't need boring plane levels, we don't need Mario Galaxy knockoffs. Just make a Sonic game. Just make a solid Sonic game. That's what people want. And while that is how I think you make a quality Sonic game that the fans are really going to enjoy, I am still very surprised at how well Sonic X Shadow Generations has sold. I felt for a long time that Sonic games have kind of forced themselves into a niche that a lot of general gamers aren't super interested in the core Sonic gameplay formula. But now, I'm doubting myself on that, because it's been a really weird experience seeing like a lot of big YouTubers and streamers and such that don't normally care about Sonic. Seeing them covering Sonic X Shadow Generations, I'm like, what the heck is going on here, man? Something has gone wrong. Something has gone terribly wrong. Why are people outside of the Sonic community talking about this Sonic game? So I started thinking about it for a while, and I came to an explanation. It might not be the reason, but it at least makes sense to me. For a good long while, Sonic has not been the franchise that it used to be back in its heyday in the 90s when Sonic was friggin' everywhere. And in fact, for a long time, Sonic has been a bit of a laughingstock and pushed off to the side, and generally people didn't really care super hugely about the franchise. However, anyone that's been a gamer for long enough has probably played at least a Sonic game at some point in their life. You know, I have friends that are super into games but don't care about Sonic at all, don't even really play many action games, and they've still played a Sonic game here or there. And back in the day, a lot of those Sonic games people really did enjoy. The original games, the adventure games, you know, people like Colors, people like the original generations. You have different generations of fans that have at least 1 or 2 Sonic games that they really enjoyed. And I wonder if deep down in many people, there's not a latent Sonic fan that's still there, that still gets excited about the prospect of a new cool Sonic game. But the series has been so what it's been for a very long time that a lot of people have just been like, it's not really doing it for me anymore. I'm not going to pick up the new Sonic game. Especially when you hear a lot of people saying like it's kind of iffy or it's not very good or whatever. And this is where I think Sega was uncharacteristically smart with the release of this package, because they're remastering Sonic Generations, which already is one of the best Sonic games ever made. But Sonic fans, of course, we're not going to be necessarily too excited about a Sonic Generations remaster, because we've already played it all 100 times. So then they package in this new game, Shadow Generations, along with it, and that gets us excited and has our attention. And then it turns out the game is really, really good, and we're all loving Shadow Generations. Plus, then you have the early release of the game, which I think was actually a genius choice by Sega for marketing purposes, not just to squeeze some extra money out of the fans willing to pay for it, but the game essentially gets 2 launches. It gets the early release launch, where all the hardcore Sonic fans pick up the game and say, yo, it's amazing. Then the proper game launches and everybody else gets it, and now they're all saying it's amazing. The hardcore Sonic fans are praising Shadow Generations for being really good. Meanwhile, the lesser hardcore fans are praising both that and Sonic Generations if they missed it the first time around. So from all angles, you have everyone really praising this package as just being excellent, and they're talking about it for a sustained period of time. And then I think you have a lot of people that played 1 or 2 Sonic games and liked Sonic at a point, but maybe haven't been into it for a long time, and they're hearing that, like, oh, this new Sonic game is, like, fantastic according to everybody? Huh. Maybe I'll pick up the new Sonic game. Maybe I'll see how that franchise is doing since I haven't been paying attention to it. I remember when I used to like Sonic games. Maybe that can happen again, and thus we get the incredibly good sales of Sonic X Shadow Generations. Maybe. Of course, also, the movie tie-in is another part of it. Again, uncharacteristically smart by Sega. This game's probably gonna get another boost in sales when the movie comes out. And it's just weird, man. It's weird to see Sonic doing well, being well-received, and everybody enjoying it and liking it. Like, it's not doing well for Sonic, it's just doing well. It doesn't make any sense, man. It feels like Sonic is back in the place that it should have always been in, but fell from. And I've just been so used to Sonic being this niche franchise that everybody makes fun of for so long that it coming out and feeling like the long-standing legacy franchise that everybody knows and loves, like I always wish it could have been, is weird. It's nice, but it's weird. At the very least, I hope it bodes well for the future of Sonic. If you look at, like, Frontiers, the free updates and stuff in that game were only because that game sold so well. So with this game managing to sell really well, perhaps we'll see some new content added to Shadow Generations. That'd be really cool. But the main thing I'm thinking now is with this game coming out, it's got a lot of Shadow in there. People are really liking it. People like Shadow. It's got more of a story going on than a lot of previous Sonic games have been. It's actually very good and feels very like 2000s-y Sonic type story. And I'm wondering now, especially with the 3rd Sonic movie, if that does very well, maybe now is finally the time when Sega is gonna do some Sonic Adventure remakes. I think that would be a pretty smart choice after Shadow Generations. People have been talking about that for a long time, and usually the reaction has always been like, I don't want current Sonic team touching the adventure games, but after Shadow Generations, I'm like, they kind of proved themselves. They've shown that they can, in fact, make a really quality Sonic game, and maybe they actually could pull off some adventure remakes. I kind of have some confidence in Sonic Team after this game, which feels incredibly weird to say. And that goes doubly so for the story stuff. That's one aspect of Sonic that I had no hope for going forward. But Shadow Generations kind of blew me away in that regard. I would go so far as to say that it has one of the best stories in a Sonic game. And I gave all the props to Ian Flynn in my story video on the game, because in the credits he's labeled as story, script, and writer. But as always with Sonic games, it's a collaborative effort between the leads at Sonic Team and the creators of the game and the writer and probably a bunch of other departments. So more accurately, I would like to give props to everybody who contributed to the story of Shadow Generations. I think that they did a fantastic job with it. That's been something really weird with my experience with Shadow Generations, but when you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world, because this is what Sonic games are. If you watch, like, my first playthrough of the game, I was like, yeah, it's okay, it's good, it's fun. But as I've played the game more, I've just come to love it more and more. I've played the game way more than I was ever expecting to. But isn't that just what Sonic games are? That's like built into the very fabric of how these games are designed. They're built for replay value. As you play the game more, you get better and you get faster, and then the game becomes more fun, and then you play it more because you're having more fun, and then you get better and it gets even more fun. That positive feedback loop is what Sonic has thrived on, and this game has been a very good example of that, where the more time I've spent with it, the more I've liked it, both in gameplay and story. It reminds me of my video on whether or not Sonic needs AAA games. This is not a huge game. This is certainly not a AAA game. It's a smaller, focused Sonic game, and I think it's exactly right for Sonic. My first playthrough was like 3.5 hours, including cutscenes, which is the typical length of most Sonic games. Production value here feels totally fine to me. Doesn't feel like a cheap game, doesn't feel like a rushed game. This is pretty much exactly what I'm looking for out of a Sonic game. I don't think they need to go much bigger than this. It would be nice if this game could have had, like, 2 more zones, maybe? But beyond that, this is, like, perfect production value-wise, I think. So, yeah, it is a good time for Sonic. I'm hoping that this is a sign of things to come and not just a one-off fluke. And if it is, I'll say, while I certainly didn't agree with people on this in regards to Sonic Frontiers, right now, this is a step in the right direction.